Welcome to another student edition of Great Books, featuring a panel of local students sharing their interest in classic literature. Here's your moderator, Jack Hatfield.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us for the Great Book Show Student Edition. I'm Jack Hatfield. Our panel meets periodically to discuss great works of classic and modern literature. Today we're discussing the short story The Overcoat by Nikolai Gogol. The Russian Gogol published The Overcoat in 1842. Gogol and this story have been very important in the development of Russian literature. This story is about the life and death of government clerk Akaky Akakievich in St. Petersburg. The story begins with Akaky being teased by other clerks about his ratty overcoat. This prompts Akaky to buy a new coat. This new coat turns into the focus of his life, but is soon stolen. Akaky finds no help from the authorities in recovering it. Finally, in the advice of another clerk in his department, he asks for help from somebody named in the story as a person of consequence. He demeans him and offers no help. Akaky falls ill with fever and dies. Soon a ghost, identified as Akaky, haunts areas of St. Petersburg, stealing overcoats. Finally, Akaky's ghost catches up with the person of consequence and takes his overcoat. Satisfied, Akaky's ghost is not seen again. The story ends with another ghost being seen in another part of the city. Obviously, getting the overcoat changed Akaky. Do you think he changed him to the better, for the worse, or did it really make that much difference?
Well, I think that in a way it might have made him better because in this society, people were judged on how they look, not who they were, because Akaky was a nice guy, yet he got stepped on. So he was still a nice guy, but he wasn't getting stepped on. From that perspective, it improved his life. And while maybe it wasn't real affection based on who this man is, maybe real affection couldn't have been found there.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that it made his quality of life better. To quote, it said, it improved his existence as if he had become fuller, as if he was married. So I think that it did give him some kind of spiritual goal for him to achieve, and to obtain this cloak was a very big deal for him. And I think in human nature, in order to be motivated and to have some sense of purpose, we always should have a next step, the next goal. So I think the process of him obtaining this cloak was very beneficial for him because it gave him more confidence. It gave him something to look forward to other than the same monotonous schedule every day. However, the actual cloak itself, the materialistic good that he was striving for, I don't know if that was the particular ideal that he should have chosen, just because in the end it did lead to his demise because of this. It was a commentary on the materialistic value, and that was in the society that greed and all these different kind of negative qualities followed. But I think the idea of the cloak was beneficial to his life.
I agree. I think in the short term, it made his life more full and enjoyable, and then it led up to this one night of celebration. But I think if he had lived and kept his coat, eventually he would have realized that it hasn't changed his life. It's just made him warmer. So he would have gone back to his same monotonous schedule it wouldn't have benefited him in the long term.
Well, before he got the coat, he loved his job. He even took it home to do it at night. And he made up stuff to copy. So in a sense, he seemed very content with his...
I would say that he almost seemed blinded in a way, blinded to the fact that people are being mean to him and that they don't care about him, and that this work is kind of an anesthetic, and he pushes himself deeper into his copying, of all things, to stop himself from realizing what his real situation is. And when the overcoat was removed, he realized that he could be respected, so he couldn't go back, and that's why he died at the end.
Yeah, in no way is a simple life a bad life. If you are good at what you do, and if you enjoy what you do, then by all means go ahead and do that. But I feel like in a way he was always confined to this destiny. He never had a further goal or a further purpose other than to be a clerk. So I feel like when he saw this cloak, it gave him something to strive for. before. So perhaps not his life beforehand, he was content, but at the same time, I feel like as humans, it's human nature to want to reach for more. And if it hadn't happened with the cloak, it probably would have happened with something else further along the line. So he might have thought that he was happy, but really his life was unfulfilled, and he filled that void with this work that was monotonous, and it had any kind of self-value, because in an ironic sense, he is copying others' work. He wasn't creating anything of his own. He wasn't filling a passion that was creative or unique to him. He was literally copying other people's work, which I feel like if a human does that for long enough, they lose themselves, and they might even, if you don't have any other interests, as he didn't have any other interests, his whole life was dedicated to work. He had no companions or family. That really consumes a person, and there's really no passion or vibrance there. So I feel like the coat really just came in as an opportunity, and it really seized that that moment in his life where maybe he had been feeling like work was not fulfilling him anymore, and the coat just made him realize that.
But did the story say that he wasn't happy with his job as a clerk?
Not textually, no, it never said that, but just sort of inferring from at least what I would have felt if I was in that position. It's easy to tell yourself that you're happy, but perhaps once you see something bigger than yourself, you're always going to want to strive for that. So maybe the cloak was just an opportunity for him to strive for something else, to be more than what he already is.
I would agree that his work wasn't really happiness, and that he was just burying himself in it. But I wouldn't say that having the coat was striving for something higher than himself. I think it was just something that made him kind of maybe look at himself in a different way, rather than giving him something to strive for.
I think his life was very simple before, and not as full as it was once he had the coat to strive for. Like the quote Katie used before, how his life had become more full like he was married. I think the coat gave him a more full life, a more exciting life. So he had the ability to be let down, but he also had the ability to be happier than he had before, instead of like a constant.
I agree, but don't you think there were people that would be happier just being a clerk, just not being all the things that you're explaining? I'm just asking. I don't know.
Well, obviously the people who are highest up in life have the hardest falls when they come down. So I feel like a lot of people will weigh those options, and they will take not necessarily a worse life, but a lower, more safer path in life. But I feel like if you don't explore those other options, then you'll never know what you're missing out on. And I feel like there will always be that human nature of curiosity of what is out there in the unknown. So perhaps people do choose the simpler paths in life, but I feel like everyone at least has a little bit of an exploratory part of their life where they look for what else is out there, even if it's just reading a book about what else is out there. But he sort of took it more in a sense of, well, at first the cloak was a necessity because they couldn't repair his old cloak. But as you read the passage about the tailor and how they began planning it out very elaborately, at least once a month for 6 months, as he saved his money, it became an ideal to him. It became something more than just a cloak. He, as it said, it sort of took place of his work. He wouldn't bring things home as much. It said that once he accidentally almost made a mistake because he was thinking about the cloak, which is a big deal for him. So I feel like this cloak became his exploratory sort of like curiosity about what's more than just his job. And unfortunately, it ended in his demise.
I agree. I think that the cloak gave him the confidence to like go and see what life was like out there, like when he went to the party and he like became friends with his colleagues. So he like never had, or not even friends, just acquaintances. He had never had this chance to actually enjoy the company of other people. He was just by himself with his copying and his work, which isn't a bad thing, but he never got to enjoy life to the fullest.
I would agree that when he was going like to the party, it was him realizing that there's more out there, and they actually note that he's kind of in awe of this luxury, and I think that's kind of symbolic of him as he's walking to this house, of him realizing, hey, there's more to life than writing down what other people have written previously. And as he's going home, he clearly realizes how shabby the neighborhood he lives in is. So I think that's also symbolic of him realizing, I can't go back to this now. I can't be who I was again. So it's kind of saying that there's no going back once you've seen something better, that whatever you've had previously is just going to seem like inferior.
Because, yeah, in the beginning it says that these people ridiculed him for his appearance, but it never bothered him until it interfered with his work, and that's when it bothered him. But after the cloak, when people start making fun of him again, it never says specifically, but it's sort of like once he's tasted that world outside of his job, outside of his profession, it's a little more offensive for those people to be making fun of him, just because he was like literally invited into a new realm because of this coat. He was invited to that party. He saw a new taste of life. He experienced positive attention for more than just his precise work. He, not exactly for himself, not for his personality, but for something that he was very close to, that he sacrificed things for. So then he lost that. I feel like that was what led to his ultimate death, just because there had been such a revelation and such a elevation of his quality of life. And then when he had realized that he had lost it, that was just too much for a person to handle.
But I'm trying to remember the party. Wasn't it that he really didn't enjoy the party? He got there and he felt very strange.
I believe it said that at the beginning, but then they offered him champagne, and when he drank the champagne, it sounded like he had started to enjoy it. And then when he was walking home, at least, it said that like he saw a woman and she ran off into the street, and he like had the fleeting idea of following her, which is sort of like awakening his playful, more joyful side, which at least not the party, but being in that part of the neighborhood, being in the richer, more affluent parts, I feel like did open up another world to him. And when he walks into the office, at the beginning at least, everyone is giving him such positive attention. And it doesn't say that he dislikes it. It says that he's uncomfortable, but I took that more as because he had never received it before and it was very unknown to him, not necessarily because he didn't want it. At least that was my interpretation.
It also says he left the party with a happy frame of mind. He even like started to run, and like you said, he wanted to chase like the girl. So he wasn't comfortable in the party, but he left there like with a positive like frame of mind.
Okay. We're kind of talking about it, but why the overcoat? Why did that change him?
I think it gave him a confidence that he hadn't had before, that he owned something that he had worked so hard for, because he lived a very simple life where he just did the same thing and he never really had that much satisfaction for it. But he had this like goal and then he achieved it, so he had this confidence that he had done something that not many people could do, because he like didn't have as much food. He like made sure he didn't overuse his clothes, so he didn't have to buy new clothes. So I think it's the overwhelming sense of satisfaction you get when you achieve like a long-term goal.
Good.
I would agree that the overcoat was something that he worked hard for, and maybe the praise that he got for it was superficial, but the feeling that he felt about his coat and that, hey, I worked hard for this. This is my own thing, and I like having it. That, I think, is what really woke up his idea of that he's better than the old life that he had.
I think just in contrast, the coat to everything else in his life, like he said, his tattered nightgown, I think it was, or any of his other clothing was always very dull, drab, nothing elaborate on it. All of it was probably very economic. So I think just in comparison to everything else in his life, it was probably just a shining star that he had never experienced before. So perhaps that's why the overcoat had such a massive effect on him, just because it was a brand new experience for someone so far into their lifetime. Because it said that he was like at least 50, I'm pretty sure. So for someone not to have like experienced like a long-term goal or a like new, expensive, like luxurious type thing until now, it was probably quite a shock for him.
I kept thinking, how would this play in our time? I was thinking 60-inch TV or something, something, or a new car or something like that. Then at the very first, you said, Katie said that maybe it wasn't such a good thing to tie your dream onto material things as opposed to something else. Do you agree with that? Is that kind of what Gogol is saying? That
Yes, I think it would have been smarter just in life when you tie your goals and your dreams to something that someone can't take away from you. So if you do it for the betterment of your knowledge or your skills, then that can't be taken away from you, but all material items can be taken away from you. So I think if he had attached his goal to something non-material, then he would have lived a longer life, especially, but also a fuller life.
I agree, mostly that point, but as well as the people in his life didn't really care about him until he had this coat, but it was because he had this coat. So after he lost it, the text mentioned that a couple of people tried to help him out by making donations or whatever, but a couple other people went back to making fun of him. I feel like in life, if you're going to attach goals to things or value to things, you should attach them to relationships and ideals instead of actual material things. Because as you said, you can lose, break, they can be stolen, all these material things just can vanish by life's whims, but relationships and skills are very hard to end or exterminate in the long term. So I feel like those should just be placed with more value because they are more permanent.
you agree?
I would agree that it is not the best idea to attach everything you are to one item, like here's Overcoat, but I have to think in the story that made this Overcoat, he didn't know what else there was, that since he had such a boring life, maybe this was all that he could attach his dreams to, is an article of clothing, which I think is kind of a sad fact about Akaki, and maybe it's Gogol trying to make a statement about society in general, that it can degrade people and hurt their lives so that all they can see is money or clothes or cars or TVs, like you were saying. So I think that's definitely an applicable statement about the world that Gogol's making here in the 19th century that can be applied to us nowadays.
Like Katie said earlier about how his copying might have made him lose himself because that's all he ever did. So once he attached his goal to the overcoat, he kind of his whole self was the overcoat. So when he got that, people started to celebrate him, but then when he lost it, people stopped. So if he attached a goal to something that he could have gained that couldn't have been taken away from him, he might have been celebrated and respected the rest of his life because he would have had something that was his personally, instead of an actual personality, instead of just life of copying that he just was someone else.
Because of the overcoat, he died. I mean, that's the story. What was the bit about the ghost then? Okay, the ghost, after he died, the ghost went around swiping overcoats. What was that about? Any idea?
I think I took it more as a tale of just revenge, honestly. It might not have been completely malicious, but I think it was I took it at least as just a lost soul wandering, trying to regain what he had lost during his life. And maybe he hadn't learned anything from it, I guess, if he was going on still trying to steal people's overcoats, or you might see it as a tale of him trying to teach other people that you shouldn't place so much value on overcoats.
Yeah.
I agree with the last part you said about how it was about teaching people, because I think he wanted to teach them that though these material things aren't something you should strive for and attach yourself to, the overcoat in Russia is something you need to survive. So then once he was able to teach the lesson to the person that actually wronged him, or he thinks wronged him, then he was able to go to rest because he knew that this person now understood what happened to him to some extent.
I was just thinking, if Chicago winter, someone stole an overcoat, that wouldn't be a lesson. That would just be.
Yeah.
That would be hypothermia.
Yeah.
It'd be hypothermia. Yeah, exactly.
That's the only reason why I'm not quite sure if he was trying to teach people a lesson, or at least teach people the lesson that overcoats aren't supposed to be the most valued thing in your life is because when he did snatch the coat from the most important personnel or whatever, he did it sort of maliciously, like he scared him a little bit, and he definitely, I think the lesson that he was more trying to teach him was that you shouldn't be as mean to people. Not as much about overcoats or about value. I think he was trying to get a little bit of retribution, and it did say in the end of the text that this guy, when he went back to work, he was less mean to his employees, and he was more, he would listen to people more, and he wasn't as judgmental. So I think that was his end goal, but that's just me personally.
I think, sorry.
Oh, you can go.
I think that Google, in having there be a ghost, might be trying to tell readers that if you think about it, Akaki had his overcoat stolen. Now he steals other people's overcoats. So maybe Google is saying that by hurting one person, like the most important personage did to Akaki, he in the end hurt himself. Because Akaki's ghost comes back and steals his coat. And that, in a larger sense, by hurting people, we might hurt the world in general, because Akaki's ghost was stealing everyone's overcoats and leaving them to freeze in the Russian winter.
I think also what's important to note is that when he frightened the important personnel, he was actually on his way to his mistress's house, and then he went back home to his family. So I think just that alone is a good indication that perhaps Akaki was trying to scare him into being a better person.
And like Quentin says, or I agree with Quentin and how then there was another ghost that appeared in another city. It just shows that it's this cycle and it's happening everywhere. It's not just specific to Akaki's life and the overcoat. It kind of can happen with
I
all
didn't
things.
understand at all the second ghost. I didn't know why it was put in there.
I just saw it as another tale, perhaps. He had wrote this small story about one man who had been done wrong. Perhaps he was a little bit at fault for his own demise, but there are definitely a lot of factors. I feel like it was sort of not like the opportunity for a sequel or anything, but like just leaving a little bit of mystery there, sort of saying like this is happening everywhere. People are being wronged. People are making mistakes everywhere. It's not just an isolated incident.
And he made the ghost kind of like, the ghost had the mustache and he was big and all that, kind of like the persons that stole his overcoat.
Yeah.
So that was, hey, Quentin at the very first, he said that Akaki was a good person. I would maybe disagree with that. Do you think he was a good person?
I think that he had a good heart at the end.
Well, how do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because, well, I don't know. I just got this feeling about him that maybe he has made a bad decision with the overcoat, and maybe he lives a really boring life. But I think that he's definitely not. His death was not definitely his own fault entirely, and I think that if he has problems or issues, I think it's because he's been kicked around so much. I mean, they said that he ignored it if someone dumped garbage on his head when he was walking down the street. So I think that Akaki, that he had a good heart, but I think he was to some extent a victim of his situation.
I agree with Clinton. The main reason why I think he was a good person is just because he wasn't a bad person. He never was malicious to anyone else. He never sought out to cause anyone else harm. And I think that really speaks volumes about someone's character, just because he never necessarily did anything courageous or brave, but he was a simple man until the overcoat. And I think when faced with a challenge that perhaps would have been more morally straining, I think he would have done the right thing, just because he never really retaliates against the people who bully him. He never asks for a raise. He's very humble, and even though he never does anything like heroic or spontaneous, he really stays true to who he is until the overcoat comes along. So perhaps I think he was just misguided with the overcoat. I think it was his lack of life experience that really led to his demise and to his and unfortunately, but I don't think that he was a bad person. I'd say that he was a good person.
Or weak. I would say maybe weak.
I'd agree.
Weak person. Go ahead.
I'd agree with what you were saying about how he never retaliates anyone. He never speaks out against these people or yells at them. he just says, hey, leave me alone as soon as they start bothering him when he's trying to work. So I think that he's definitely harmless at worst.
Kind of as a last question, why don't we just go around, and did you like it? Was there other topics that jumped out at you when you read it, or questions? What's your reaction to it, Quentin?
I really enjoyed the story personally. I think that this Akaki character can definitely symbolize people who have been pushed around repeatedly and how are clinging to something small even when it's bad for them, ultimately, like it's like his coat. And I think that that's definitely a statement both about the Russian society of Gogol's time and a warning that can be taken now, both about the trouble of material possessions, like what they were saying, and about what it does to a man, and to A, do nothing, and B, have people bully him for his life.
I really enjoyed the author's style. I liked how there were certain points in the books where he was talking just directly to the reader. Like when he introduces the tailor, he says, like, I don't really have to tell you anything about him, but I'm going to because that's what people do in books, or I paraphrase that. But I really enjoyed that. I thought it was enjoyable. It kept me interested. And I also liked the timelessness of the piece because I think it's a message we constantly need to be reminded of. And I liked the way he told it, and it was simple. It wasn't too much to say, but he said just enough.
I agree. I liked the work. I liked the way that he sort of split off into small anecdotes to describe people instead of using just like basic adjectives. Like instead of saying Akaki was simple man, he would like go off and tell you about his profession and like how these little short stories. I thought that was very interesting and added more life to the story. And I also thought it was a very important message, and that just that people need to take a step back and reevaluate their placement of the importance in their life. And I enjoyed it, and it wasn't super difficult read, so.
I don't know if you were like me, you read it for the first time, you go, it's just a surfacey short story, and then the second time you read it, you go, oh, maybe there's more to it. Then you discuss it, and kind of all these things come out. That's what's kind of exciting, I think, about this way of discussing books, is hearing other people's opinion. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next time as we discuss another great selection. As Aristotle said, the best way to learn is to get together in small groups and discuss great ideas.